Great. Mike McShane of EdChoice. Always great to have you on the podcast.
Always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I read your Substack, Informed Choice. I know you don't write them all, but you write a lot of them.
I try to.
And I think they're super interesting. And I guess a month or so ago, there was a lot of what's out, what's in, closing down 2025, starting 2026. And I really liked your post about 6 words for 2026. And I want to talk about that. But generally speaking, I've been having this feeling that, and I think we've even talked about this on the podcast, where something has changed in the education of K-12 in the United States. Like something seems to feel different than it did. And you guys certainly track the number of kids in private school choice programs, which took forever to get to 1 million. And now it's like 1.5 million,
Yeah.
right? It just seems to have been growing so fast. And
I think there has definitely been a shift that took place. And I've even noticed it, with the start of the year and legislative sessions starting across the country. I'm talking to journalists and other folks. And it seems like the normal conversation that I would have with journalists in the past was sort of like, well, are we going to have these programs? Like, is there going to be choice or like what? And now it's all like, what is the shape of it going to be? So much of choice now is just being taken as a given. And I think we're even seeing that within public school districts, that even in states that might not have private school choice or robust charter schools, like they are at least saying like, well, parents are going to need to have choice. And maybe we can keep the genie in the bottle by just having it within, public school districts or in between public school
Kansas.
districts. Yeah. But like the idea that we're going to go back to residentially assigned public schools with the odd aberration here and there, it just seems like that shift has happened. And now it's just a question of like, what's it going to look like? And it's going to look different in different states and whatever. But yeah, it's not a whether, it's a how.
That's right, because we have a whole bunch of second-generation choosers, right?
Yeah, for
We have
sure.
parents of young kids whose parents chose it. So they're not, like you said, they're not going to go backwards. And an interesting outcome of that you certainly have talked about over the years is the Catholic school movement is growing
Yeah,
again, right? Like in
right?
Florida, we're seeing resurgence in Catholic schools
Iowa,
because,
Florida, probably in other places when
oh yeah,
data comes out.
Iowa.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's not that parents didn't want to send their kids to Catholic schools. They either got mad about the scandals or they didn't want to pay tuition. And
Yeah.
and now that you can, and certainly this survey y'all have done for so long on where parents would send their kids to school versus where they do send their kids to school, maybe we're going to see some sort of like a convergence there where parents can actually send their kids to the school they want to send their
Totally.
kids to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So a couple of the words that you said 6 words that are going to be big in education 2026, but participants, is that right?
Yeah,
Participants
participants is one of them.
and supply side. And what do you mean by
So
participants?
participants is like there's this big debate now, and this is sort of, I started the piece with very like general words that are sort of, I think, just like in the conversation or like that we're gonna hear about, and then I got very, very narrow to like school choice research words. And this is kind of, participants is kind of like a school choice research word, but not entirely. I think it's definitely gonna be part of broader debates and conversations about choice in general. But there's just big question out there, which is who uses these programs? Like who is going to participate in these programs? And there are competing theories of who will use these programs, and there are skeptics of these programs who say, oh, it's just going to be all rich kids, or it's going to be kids that are already in private schools. And you have people that are stronger advocates for the program that are saying, no, it'll be low income kids, or it'll be kids that are desperate for more options. And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, and actually will probably be different in different places at different times. And I think some of the emerging research that we're seeing is when these programs first start, and this is like universal private school choice programs that say anybody in the state can participate, it seems like at the outset, for reasons that are perfectly predictable, students that are already in private schools are the first movers. And that's probably because the private schools find out about these programs and have an audience.
Pass out a piece of paper in every backpack.
They have an audience that they
Yeah.
can say to, like, hey,
Yeah.
you all, hey, you know
should
how
get
all of
this.
you are paying to go here? Like now we can actually, you don't have to do that anymore. And then over time, the circle expands outward, and more those families have neighbors and they have cousins and they have people that they play YMCA basketball with. the word sort of gets out over time. I think generally speaking, a lot of the traditional channels for educating people about this don't necessarily work as well. It's not like everyone watches the nightly news or reads the
Put
local
it on your
newspaper.
website.
Yeah, right. Like none of
That's a
that stuff's out
Missouri
there.
legislation uh, mainstay. Put it
Yeah.
on your
So
website.
all of this stuff is going to come out via word of mouth or via discussions. And so I think that so you could look at the same state even and see over the course of time who is participating in the program changing. And because we have these programs rolling out in different states at different times, there is not going to be one national answer of like who is participating in these programs. It could be, well, in the first year, we're in the first year in Mississippi, but we're in the second year in Alabama or whatever. And so the makeup of the students is going to be different. And I think because of the kind of nationalized nature of the way a lot of these stories are covered, people are going to keep pushing for like, but like, what is the one answer? Who's using it? And it's going to be, there isn't one answer. Though, to be fair, probably some people will say there is one answer. I don't think that will actually be true.
Yeah, I certainly get a ton of questions around the rural issue,
Yeah.
which is like either it's going to be the demise of our rural school system because they're all going to close, or rural families don't need it, which are
It can't be both.
opposite.
Like I don't,
It's opposites, right?
it can't be both of those things. And yet a frequent
But I get
criticism is
that a
that we'll do
lot.
both of them. No,
Yeah,
of course.
there's no private schools for them to go to,
Okay.
and it's going to cause rural schools to
Yeah.
close. And I think it's sort of like certainly in Missouri, even our most scholars program is quite small, and we don't really have charter schools outside of
Yeah.
two districts. I mean, two very far away places. So I think for a lot of folks in Missouri, it is mysterious, like who would do this and why would anyone want it? And of course, all the poor kids are going to go to the wealthy school districts. Still a lot of talk about property taxes.
Yeah.
It's almost like 2005 in
Right.
Missouri. A lot of that going on. Um, but the reality is in the long running programs, and now I'm sort of thinking open enrollment, just anywhere where you let parents pick, you get a lot of rural participation. They have the fewest choices, right? And you get a lot of urban participation and some suburban participation. Like you said, I don't think that you can, I've had so many parents over the years saying, well, we don't need that here because all our schools are good. And I'm like, I promise you, there's a child who got on the bus with stomach ache this morning. They did not want to go to
Yeah,
school for
for
whatever reason.
sure.
They think the teachers don't like them or they're being bullied or whatever it is. But I promise
Totally.
you, there are families who would leave if they could easily do it.
Well, and one of the
Um,
things too that is going to be interesting, like as we watch this play out and we have these questions, who's participating, and the questions like who's leaving public schools to go to these, there are these broader secular trends of the number of public school students decreasing. So this is like you're hearing in some states, it's like, oh my gosh, all these public schools are closing because of choice programs. And you're like, well, actually, the state next door that doesn't have a choice program, their public schools are closing as well because there are just fewer kids than there were before. So that's going to be another thing of sort of disentangling, of looking at the sort of secular population trends. I was just saying something on my
Huge.
social media earlier, looking at how congressional seats and electoral college seats are going to change because of population shifts. And so you look at states that are, I think, New York and California and others that are losing large numbers of kids, Florida, Texas, other places that are increasing numbers of, I shouldn't say of kids, of these are just people in general, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how that all happens. But like, we have to start with that as a baseline and then layer these other things on top of it, because I feel like school choice is going to get blamed for this,
Yeah, yeah.
even in places where it doesn't exist.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked about this and how many people I've shocked, but every school district in St. Louis County, for example, it has declining enrollment by
Right?
large numbers. The fancy Clayton's declining enrollment, Ladue declining enrollment, all declining enrollment. People are like, where are they going? And I said, they weren't born.
Yeah.
They simply weren't born. We had our biggest kindergarten cohort in 2013. That moved through to senior year of high school like 2 years ago. And it's just demographics. They just weren't born. Yeah, we have a net out migration of some groups of people, people with bachelor's degrees, but yeah, for sure. Although I haven't dug into the new census numbers enough to see exactly how Missouri was impacted, but apparently the Midwest didn't lose as many people.
No,
But
yeah,
yeah,
it
it's
didn't
demographics. These
gain.
kids weren't born.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is going to be this, I think, push and pull between 5 to 17-year-olds and retirees basically
Mhm.
because we're getting more there's going to be more old people and fewer young people. And do we build a school or nursing home? I think is going to be a thing. And we still have
Totally.
school districts getting bonds, 30-year bonds to build schools and to buy buses. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the right answer.
Yeah.
At least the charter school sector and probably similarly private school sector, charter school sector figured out how to not be in the real estate business, how to
Yeah.
lease a building, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Or how to do different types of arrangements. And they're going to be the ones who are going to benefit from this while the public school system is still building schools. I'm like, the kids aren't being born, but we'll see how that plays out. Another thing that you mentioned is one of your words I've been thinking about a lot, two of them, is transparency. I've actually been wondering, can I start calling accountability transparency? Because accountability is kind of negative, but transparency, of course, and you talk about rage bait. Sorry, I'm rolling these all into one. But of course, with the early, media stories around some of these private school choice programs like Arizona, people really jumped on what parents were spending their money on as though
Totally.
they cannot be trusted to spend this money in the way that public school system can be trusted with billions, I mean trillions of dollars. The parents cannot be trusted with this $8,000.
Well,
They'll
this is
simply
the irony.
blow it.
Yeah, the irony here is sort of like the discussion earlier of how there's no places in rural America, and everyone will leave rural schools to go to these non-existent places. Like, both of those things can't be true at the same time. We can't say that these programs are not transparent and then talk about all of the individual purchases that families are making, right? Like, that has to be transparent in order for you to be able to make those arguments. And so, yeah, I think it's honestly, it's just kind of a shell game that people are playing when they talk about transparency, because when you say, well, here are ways in which ESA programs, like your research is a perfect example of this. I mean, transaction level data. You have published papers that offer transaction level data on every purchase in the ESA program.
Trust me.
Right? As you've
100 and there's hundreds of thousands of records.
hundreds of thousands of records that are able for anybody to look at. And I think this is actually good. We need to have discussions of what should be included in these programs and what isn't. It is an education savings account, not just a savings account. So we have to draw the borders around what's an educational purchase and what isn't. We live in a big, vibrant
Broadly.
democracy, so we need to have these discussions. Should you be able to buy a trampoline or a Lego set or whatever? Let's talk about it. That's fine. Like, that's cool. And maybe we'll decide, in some cases it's allowed, in some cases it isn't. That's all right. Like, this, again, it's sort of part of transparency and accountability. You're democratically accountable. Like, we need to participate in this. But anyway, I am still blown away by the number of people who claim that these programs are not transparent, when it's like,
Right.
what we know about what parents are doing is more granular and more detailed than any public school district, than any charter school network, than almost any institution you're going to see, because you just don't get transaction level data on anything. And so, look,
No,
we can debate whether those are good purchases or whether those are not good purchases, but to say that they're not being transparent is just wild to me.
yeah, I mean, my kids all went to public school. They certainly went to amusement parks. They certainly watched a lot of
Geez, for
movies.
sure.
I mean, they would not want anyone scrutinizing every, you have 30 teachers, buy 30 whiteboards. You know what
Oh,
I mean? Like decisions were
oh,
made
for
that weren't the
sure.
best. And I didn't see anything in the transactional level data, but I also feel like, who am I to say that woodworking's not an okay thing for your
Yeah.
child to learn to do? I mean, swimming lessons. I had to swim and I don't know. Like, I don't want to get into that conversation because I'm assuming the best intentions for parents. I can't understand why a parent would invest the time and effort to get into these programs to simply buy themselves a trampoline.
Right.
It just doesn't, and not really care if their kids are reading
Yeah.
or not. I just don't really I don't I don't understand that, but that is what I mean, I feel like they're throwing mud at the wall to try to
Yeah.
discredit this idea when clearly it's just what parents want. I am a little baffled by the fact that when you look at politics writ large in America, in the United States right now, which is it's an interesting time, I guess I'll say, but I feel like um, those on the left just refuse to accept this fact.
Totally.
It's just a
Oh,
fact.
for sure.
Parents want to choose their school.
Yeah.
And the longer I mean, there's certainly Democrats for education reform, and there's plenty of people working on this very hard from the left, but like the general approach feels very last century to me, of the teachers union saying nobody wants this and
Yeah.
we have to stop it at all cause at all, we just have to put a halt to this and put more money into the public school that your address sends you to. We need to fund those fully first before we can ever let kids out, and that's such a failed argument to
Well, look,
me.
and this is why accountability and transparency to me are two of the words for 2026, because I think that opponents to choice have figured out that they can't just go out hammer and tongs against it, or they can't just directly say we're against choice. I quoted
Terry McAuliffe ran for governor
yeah,
of Virginia
everyone,
saying,
people tend to not learn lessons in politics, but they learn that one, which is like, yeah,
Mhm.
you probably shouldn't go out and say things like that. But, I was looking at the gubernatorial candidate just to Missouri's north in Iowa. It was this really interesting, I, of course, talk about rage bait, things that just like pop up in my social media, but it was an interview with the Democratic candidate for governor. And the interviewer very perceptively, like asking the exact questions that I would, Rob Sand is the guy's name. And he was saying, oh, like I'm not for transparency, or I'm for accountability, whatever. And the interviewer kind of drilled down and said, wait a second. Are you saying you're not opposed to this program? Like, you're okay with this program? You just want changes to it? And it was interesting because he didn't say yes to that. Like, he never has said, I'm for this program. If you read between the lines and been doing this as long as we have, we see that he's saying, I'm not for this program, but I can't come out and say it. But his pivot was immediately like, look, I'm just talking about accountability and transparency. I'm just talking about accountability and transparency. I just want private schools to follow every single one of the same rules that public schools do and expect them to act, to somehow do better or whatever. But I think seeing that strategy and realizing that and frankly, look, I think in part of it is these are folks that are working in red states who need to make arguments that appeal to conservatives. Accountability appeals to conservatives.
Sure.
Fiscal responsibility appeals to conservatives, not wanting to waste tax dollars or whatever. So they're smart. It's a smart strategy. It's just clear that people need to see what it is. That it's like, no, if this is in a blue state, these exact same people are just making arguments that appeal to progressives. But you're in a red state, so they're trying to make arguments that appeal to you. But if you think about them for just a little bit longer, then they're saying them, they don't hold a lot of water.
Yeah, and so with this federal tax credit program where, even if every state has to decide whether or not they're going to take the money. So it's going to be this weird shifting of resources, because if I live in a state that says we're not going to take the money, that's fine. I can give my
Yeah,
$1,700 to a scholarship group in a state anywhere. I mean, I'll just send my $1,700 to another state.
yeah,
So some states like Virginia, the governor, one of the last things he did when he left is opt in. And now the new governor is going to have to make this weird choice, I think. Like, do I want to go against? If you looked at any poll of parents,
yeah,
any poll, you would know that they want to be able to choose where their kids go to school.
yeah.
And do you really want to be that
Well,
person
she
that
seems to be in a
withdraws?
perfect position to just say, oh, the last guy
I
did
don't know. I
this.
didn't do it.
The last guy did this on the way out, so I guess we're going to do it. And then once they do it for a year and everybody's fine with it, just, oh, well, whatever, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting because, again, like the way I started this, I think there's a groundswell, and I just don't think you're going to turn it back. And I think if you stay on the side of saying it's better when kids can only go to their assigned public school, you're not. It's quicksand, right? I mean,
Look,
you're going to bury yourself.
the only thing I would say, and it was another one of my 6 words that you referenced in this that is always kind of lingering in the background for me is rage bait, right? So one of the words that I use, and I'm just seeing it more and more all day, every day, of stuff that shows up in your feed deliberately to upset you, terrify you, whatever. And I think rage bait is unpredictable. You never know what's going to kind of catch fire with people and what's going to cause some big shift. And I think that there is obviously lots of potential for rage bait content as we mentioned, we've crossed, 1.5 million, hundreds of thousands of people in various states with lots of flexibility in what they're going to buy, people making bad decisions, people stealing things, like totally possible that those things are going to happen. Something totally egregious and terrible could happen. I mean, just with a law, even very, very improbable events in a large enough population can happen. And so one fear I do have, and again, there's nothing you can really do about this, but it is something to think about in the background and to sort of prep yourself to say, oh, this is just rage bait. Like this isn't actually what's happening. If one parent in Arizona decides to do something crazy, that doesn't mean that the other 1,499,999 parents around the country should not have the right to do this or the opportunity to do this. But that is one thing that I do think about in the background of like, what is there some way that the tide could turn back in the other direction? And could it be some rage baity type thing that happens and people lose their
Yeah, I
minds
mean,
over it?
we've talked about this because for some reason, those of us who have pressed for school choice for so long and had said, we'll do anything. You want our arm? Here, take it. We'll put all of our data out there. We'll be as transparent as
For
possible.
sure.
We'll take, and your colleague, Marty Lucan, has, I guess, a Substack about this recently, which is like, we'll take half the money.
Yeah,
You
right.
know what I mean? We don't need all the money. For half the money, we'll be 150% transparent and we'll go, just to get this thing that everybody wants, we'll just jump through all these hoops. And it's from that transparency that we're going to get
Yeah.
those stories.
So it's just
I mean, we're
important
gonna pay for
and
that.
look, I think people in general should be much more attuned to the rage bait that they're getting. Because I can't tell you
Yeah.
how many times people say to me, like, have you seen this thing that happened
Oh
in
my
this
gosh.
place? And I'm like, okay.
I don't think it did.
Yeah. Or even if it did, it's kind of like, okay, a teacher in Sacramento did something crazy. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's hundreds of, there's north of 100,000 schools across America. There's north of 3 million public
Oh
school
yeah.
teachers. At any given moment, someone's doing something dumb that I don't know what to exactly extrapolate from that. Could just be one crazy person or one dumb person. And look, and this is just in education, obviously, like all across every public policy area. They
Sure.
pointed this. Here's one person in the military doing something terrible to like delegitimize the military in general. It's like, no, don't fall for this. Don't, just because one person did one crazy thing, that could just be because there's one crazy person doing one crazy thing. And look, to be fair, sometimes we in the school choice movement or in the education reform movement have done rage bait of our own. People
Sure.
have used social media to point out, oh my gosh, look at this assignment that a second grade
Oh, yeah.
teacher in Poughkeepsie did. This is why we
Yeah,
need
yeah.
school choice. Look, people
Yeah.
have done that. And I think, what the measure with which you measure will be measured back to you. Like if you or live
And
by the sword, die by the sword.
John Oliver did a story on charter schools.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember? It was
Yeah.
the guy in Florida that was loaning out charter school at night to be a nightclub.
Yeah,
There's no way that that's representative of charter
totally.
schools.
And so like
That was his example, which I found shocking, but I'm
yeah,
like, anyone using any public school, I mean, also making some money, you know what I mean? Like he was making good use of the space.
Yeah.
Certainly public schools are used for churches and
Yeah,
other good things,
totally.
and he used it as a nightclub. But that's not at all representative. But I think you're right. They
We
will
should
find
all
those
use less
stories.
rage bait. We should use
Absolutely.
we shouldn't use rage bait to say just because one teacher in one place did something dumb that's like an indictment of public education in general. Nor should we allow the same thing to be done in reverse, which is just because one family did one thing that's crazy, then we shouldn't have choice at all.
Well, then that leads to another one of your words, which is slop. I mean, I think there's so much talk about AI in schools and what to do about it. And is one person going to figure this out for every school everywhere? Or are we all going to figure this out individually?
Yeah, I sort of played out my scenario here that I'm worried about. I don't know if it'll happen in 2026, but it might. We've heard a lot of stuff about AI in schools, about students cheating and things, which I think is all real and is worrisome and bad. But like the specific scenario that I haven't necessarily heard as many people talking about that I kind of spell out in the piece is now with the prevalence of AI video, the ability that people have to create videos of things that didn't happen. So how many, if you have a student in a classroom that just after taking a picture or a short unrelated video of their teacher is able to put through a series of prompts, hey, have this teacher do, and then insert whatever horrible thing next. Say something horrible, do something horrible, whatever. And if you're not savvy, and look, I will be the first to say, I think I'm a very savvy consumer of the internet. I
Mhm.
have been fooled or very close to fooled,
It's like a parlor game, right?
right? Like AI videos of,
No,
animals
no
doing
dogs are going off of diving boards, though,
dogs off the or
just
dogs
to clarify.
protecting people from the bears. Or there was the one recently that went around that was like the bald eagle that had ice on their beak that someone knocked off on, whatever. Like, again,
The rabbits on the trampoline. I mean,
right?
these are not
Yeah.
happening,
Trivial things that you can just on your first
but you're
glance,
right.
but people who aren't as savvy at that, again, the thing that I sort of sped out there was, okay, that someone does that, and then suddenly the next PTA meeting is flooded with people that this viral thing went around, and the superintendent or the principal or whatever is having to say, this didn't happen. It's not real. And if you don't have the kind of media literacy, I don't actually know, then it's
What, are we
sort of
all
like,
just gonna film
yeah, or
ourselves
someone's
to
word
disprove?
versus another
Oh,
word. Like, yeah, we saw it happen and it's on video. No, that didn't happen. It's AI. How we like adjudicate those things. And again, like how that could be weaponized by teenagers to put one over on their teachers, how that could be weaponized by sort of bad
do you
actors who
fear
are,
you're putting an idea into people's heads
I
right now?
know, right? Oh, the thing that I've learned with all of this AI stuff is that like all of that stuff will happen. Think of whenever a new model is released and everyone tries to break it immediately. They're much more creative than I ever was. But so I'm really worried. I'm worried for teachers. I'm worried for schools. I'm worried for just like broader, like I said, school board meetings or whatever. How much are they going to have to deal with? It could be anything. It could be like taking video at a football game or something and then saying something happened that it didn't. And the
Yeah.
amount of just time and energy, even if it all works out eventually, the amount of time and energy that's going to have to be wasted trying to deal with all of this stuff. Now, again, look, I'm hoping more and more schools, this could be a real kick in the rear end to get phones out of schools and be like, hey, listen, we're not going to have phones in schools because people are going to be making AI videos of their teachers. That's one of 1,000 reasons why we shouldn't have phones in schools. But that's not the only place where kids are interacting with one another or where they're interacting with their teachers or others. So I think that's something we really got to be thinking about, really, really skeptical of. Really, when we see that video of that teacher doing something or that student doing something or that principal doing something, taking a deep breath and saying, like, is this video real? Like, does this pass the smell test? Does this sound like something a teacher would actually do? Um, so I think, yeah, I'm increasingly actually worried about that. There's so many other things in the world that other people worry about that I don't really worry about. But this sort of AI video in the context of schools, bad news
Yeah,
bears,
I mean, I feel like, or I've said, like, we're gonna have to start adjusting our thinking to only believing things that happen in front of our face,
right?
like, that we can touch. Because, the prevalence of, Amazon, all their ads now, they've said are AI. I mean, like,
Right?
picture I went to get my haircut and somebody was holding up a picture and she's like, "Okay, well, that's not a real
Yeah.
person."
Right?
Like, we're gonna just have to sort of default to disbelief if it's on a
Totally.
phone or on a screen, and if it's happening in front of you, you can touch it, you can believe it, but the rest of it, I think we're gonna just become I hope, very skeptical,
Right, and is
because
it like
I don't believe much stuff
schools are
anymore.
gonna need to have their own, like, CCTV cameras everywhere?
Yep,
Is that gonna be, it's
yep,
like, are we then gonna have to be, like, oddly surveilled in a lot of different ways just for people doing CYA? Just like, well,
yeah,
listen,
yeah.
if people are gonna be making up fake videos, we need to have the real video of what's going on, like, I don't know how that's going to go, but that was sort of like the rage bait one, my like plea to people of like, please don't fall victim to rage bait because it's something, it's pinging parts in all of our brains that we
Yeah,
need to not,
dopamine, yeah,
right? And it's like,
mhm.
I get wrapped up in it and oh my God, I can't believe that's happening. And then, you take 10 seconds, you're like, wait, why am I fired up about this? Some road rage incident in South Carolina. Like someone cut somebody off on the highway. Who cares? Like whatever. I'm not there. It's not my deal. I think this slop stuff is also something we're just going to have to be really, really cautious about and really thoughtful about because it could cause lots of problems.
Yeah, but then the people are like, "I'm not gonna allow AI and I'm gonna check it." Like, I think AI we're gonna have to just accept,
Yeah, that's the
right?
thing is like we're
We
just
have
gonna
to
have to
live with
realize
it.
that like this is just part of it, and there will be so many great things that will come out of it, and
Yeah,
like the creativity that'll be able to unleash. I mean, look, I think like in our own Substack, a bunch of the graphics and stuff we do are AI generated, and I could not. I laugh. I have young kids, and they are better drawer. I'm horrible at it, but I can do this stuff with a couple of prompts in Chat GPT and like, hey, make me and they can be funny, and I do picture of somebody in the style of this famous painter, and it's
sure.
like, oh, it's suddenly like a Renaissance painting of whatever, of me, it could do whatever to make it laugh.
Great.
And so that's incredible, and the fact that I don't have to have a graphic designer or like a Substack, I can basically just do myself and put out like essentially like a small newspaper with a combination of some contributors and a bit of AI. Like that's an insane productivity increase and is incredible. But also have to be cautious of the downsides.
Yeah, yeah. Finally, your last word here. Again, many of these you've talked about for a long time, but
Right?
the supply side
Yeah.
is, in Missouri, as I said, folks will say, well, look, we don't need private school choice in our rural areas. There's no private schools, as though the supply of private schools is fixed. And it
Right.
is like this sort of like natural result of how much interest there is in private schooling and the kind of people who live in the community, and what is there without much thought to the fact that, like, if parents all of a sudden had 7 or 8 thousand dollars to spend, maybe somebody would open a new school, like,
Totally.
or not even open a new school. Maybe somebody would open, a visual arts business, or maybe
Totally.
somebody would open a, I don't know, soccer academy, whatever it is that they just, or tutoring, or dyslexia therapy, whatever it is they think parents want or need. You are would be free then to be an entrepreneur in that space, and I think that that piece of it is largely overlooked because it's like, well, it's like a Malthusian, like we have
Yeah.
this many private schools with this many seats, so we can only have this many scholarships. It's like, no, that is not a fixed thing. So, do you think that we're going to see a lot of changes in that area?
Yeah, because on another dimension and where people think that they're fixed is it's not only is there a fixed number and a fixed set of locations, but there's also like a fixed shape of what those schools look like, right? So it's like, oh, well, we're not going to have a private school in this small area because we can't have a brick and mortar
There's no
building with
buildings.
30 rooms in it and 250 kids or whatever. It's like, oh, yeah, but like that's not what we're talking about here. Turns out like if you can get 10 kids together at 8 grand a piece, you can do a lot of interesting stuff there. Like you can, especially if you can get like the space donated to you, and you can leverage different resources in the community, like as you brought up, like that there's already cool stuff happening in the community, a little bit of stuff that might be available online, and a local teacher. Turns out you could put together a heck of an education for some young people on, 80 grand or 100 grand or whatever you end up getting. So I think that's it's happening, and what makes it challenging for people to talk about is that it's happening across different dimensions. So like at the same
100%.
time that we're talking about Catholic schools growing and starting new Catholic schools in a very kind of traditional sense, like very traditionally organized schools, about as traditional can get in American education. Like while that is happening 2 blocks away in some rented bungalow, people are creating some Montessori micro school. And so I think it's going to be a challenge because, sort of as we were talking about earlier, because these things tend to get spoken about in national terms and can tend to be in like 1,000-word news story, we struggle to discuss things across multiple dimensions. And this is one of those dimensions where not only are existing schools growing, but new schools are emerging, and those new schools are going to look different. And some of them will grow, and some of them will shrink, and some of them will, all of these things can be happening at once. And so our job, I think, as researchers and observers of this is to really do just a lot of descriptive work. Just like describe what's happening. Like there's been such a push in previous kind of generations of school choice research of like causal results based horse race. So like, are they better than public schools? Or is this type of private school better than that type of private school? Yada, yada, yada. And it's like, hey, the only reason we were able to do that in like 1998 is because for like 100 years before that, people were doing the descriptive work to know, wait, how many schools are these and what are they doing? And then we
Yeah.
can get to the point where we can talk about is one doing better or worse, because we had to decide, well, what are they doing? Like, where are they? What are they doing? Who's attending them? Are there differences? So it's almost like we're starting over and doing that kind of basic descriptive work of like, okay, like what is actually happening here? What are people doing? Yeah.
Yeah, I know somebody who started a school in a barn on their property, and the parents all came and converted the empty barn to a school. And I know somebody who started a mobile school, basically in a big van, so that all the students in the school hosted school. Like one day a week, school came to their house. Like it was like this mobile thing. And I know someone who started one in a high rise in Queens. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just like only limited by people's imagination,
Yes.
basically, right? And a like minded group of parents. Oh, certainly there's plenty of people, way more people now homeschooling than used to be. So you could do this individually, but there's so many more opportunities to do it. As you know, parents, what emerged from the pandemic, at least, is sort of they want their kids home maybe 2 days
Yeah.
or 3 days. And that is a real popular thing, and people are finding that 2 days out of the house thing really unique opportunities in that space, right? And, I think it's just only limited by people's imagination and some curriculum standards and perhaps some accountability. But if you can meet those, I think that we're really seeing this idea, and I'm not trying to be anti-traditional public school, but I butted up against this when my kids were little. Like, we're the only ones who know how to do this, and so you have to accept our way of doing it
Yeah.
because it's tried and tested, and comes out of our schools of education at the in college and universities, and this is the one and only way. You have to teach the number line in third grade, kind of thing, or
Yeah,
it's like this is
for
how it
sure.
it has to be this way. We cannot vary that because we're this great equalizer, which your boss, Rob Inlow, really shut me down on this. But, it's like it's the great equalizer of civic society in the United States. That hasn't really panned out,
No.
right? We only read and do math less well each
Yeah.
year as we go. And I can't imagine that letting all of these flowers bloom is going to have a worse result. If we're able to fast forward 20 years and look at median earnings, educational attainment rates, and we really let this thing thrive, I think that there's only one potential outcome is that it would improve.
Well, and
I
that's the
don't
thing
see
is,
how it goes down.
well, and that's like what's funny. You mentioned the kind of interesting times that we're living in now. So many of the like parade of horribles that choice opponents forever have been talking about is like if there's more school choice, like think of the polarization that it'll cause in our politics and the Supreme Court, the balkanization that
Yeah.
everyone will retreat to their own silos or whatever. It's like, hey guys, that already happened like without choice. So you can't blame choice because choice didn't exist yet for that to happen. I think lots of people who are like, pushing each other in the streets all went to public schools. Just the most statistical probability here is that these are all public school graduates who are all having very large problems with one another. And so the thought that introducing choice into this or pluralism or more options, like, to me, I mean, look, the conservative in me says things can always get worse. So it is worth always having the background is that like things, the classic, I think Yuval Levin talking about, the fundamental progressive view is like things can always get better and the fundamental conservative view is things could always get
Right.
worse. So that like strand in me is like things could get worse. But across a lot of these dimensions, whether it's the academic outcomes that we're seeing, whether it's the civic outcomes that we're seeing, there is a lot of room for growth and not
But yeah.
nearly as much bottom end to fall out of it. So to me, the risks associated with giving people more choices is not nearly as severe as some of the proponents of the traditional
Yeah.
public schooling system would make it out to be.
Well, in Missouri, 40% of our fourth graders are below the basic level in reading, which means they can't read at all.
You
They
know?
can't read. They are
So,
illiterate. And would 40% of parents, if given the money to spend on their child's education, would 4 out of 10 of them have a 9-year-old and say, "Turns out they can't read."
yep, guess
You
we
know?
quit.
"I tried and
Yep,
tried. We just didn't get there. They just cannot read."
yep.
I don't think so. I don't think the parents, and I know that this is not the perfect solution that accountability through parental choice is the answer. I'm not saying that, but I just don't think that if really parents were put in charge, that 4 out of 10 would just say, "Gosh darn it, this kid's never going to
Yep.
read. Oh well."
Yeah.
Um, there's probably a lot of opportunity for them to work in, the service industry. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't think
I
so. I
agree with you.
think that
Yeah.
that would be a much better check on the system.
Agreed. 100%.
So interesting stuff. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Always so great to talk to you. And what your Substack is called?
Informed
What?
Choice. So people can check that out.
Yeah.
Informed Choice on Substack. Subscribe. It'd be great.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Great.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Yeah.